Have your Bibles?
I don't need a Bible. I'm sitting by the preacher.
You're sitting by the preacher. You got all the answers. All the answers. Speaking of that, since James, which way did he answer that last question? Was it Moses or God? God, of course. Okay. Because what actually, on a side note, that one thing that Moses forgot, he forgot to give the credit, and he forgot to listen to God in all times. And that caused him from being able to see the promised land after wandering the desert for 40 years. Just an interesting note. It says, when times are tough, as they are now, we need every advantage we can possibly get to help us in our day-to-day living. We need understanding to face these difficult times. How in the world can we make it through? How in the world can we ride out the storm? So let's just stop and think about that for a second in general. Is this unprecedented times? All right, I don't want to pick out on the oldest people here, but older people would have seen more. So, Buddy Yoder, is this unprecedented times? Okay, now you were alive, not World War I, right? No, okay, I was just checking. World War II. No? Just being born, World War II. So Korea, Vietnam, all that, you remember? Yes. Okay. Some of the rest of you? For us younger people, we have less major world events to fall back on. But right now, truly unprecedented times where we've had something that without a doubt affected and is affecting everybody in this world. I'm not saying that each and every one of us knows someone that's gotten sick. But each and every one of us is riding this storm. We're in the midst of it. We're trying to decipher how we feel, what our level of fear is, how we handle the level of fear that other people have. And sometimes that's more difficult than the virus itself. How we react to each situation has never been so delicate as it is right now. This storm that's called the coronavirus, COVID-19, has changed how each and every one of our day-to-day life is. Now, some of you may scoff, hasn't changed how I'm acting. I've been a hermit since 76. And the next person says, I just want to go to the Italian oven for dinner and then the Texas Roadhouse for supper. I just want to go out and have a nice meal prepared by somebody else. And I'll admit, I was one of them people as well. Last night, I got my first meal prepared by somebody else. And, well, I shouldn't say prepared by somebody else. Yeah, Julie usually takes care of it. But actually, Abigail has stepped up. My daughter stepped up. This one thing's for sure, COVID-19 has taught her how to cook. She's been helping a bit because she has more free time. But how we react to this storm, how we react as Christians to this storm, I think there's a difference there. As we show up here this morning in a different scenario than normal Sunday school setting, we need still to worship. And I'm thankful that we can be here this morning. Very thankful that we can be here this morning. I wish I didn't have this mic on, but still thankful to be here. It says what we need is wisdom. One dictionary defines it as understanding of what is true, right, or lasting, common sense, good judgment, learning. The words that are used for wisdom in the Bible imply having skill in living, following God's design, and avoiding moral pitfalls. The Bible Knowledge Commentary sums it up as being skilled in godly living. And that is true heavenly wisdom. That wisdom teaches us the skills for godly living and yet serves as a guide for earthly living. Proverbs tells us that to find this wisdom, we must call out for it, cry aloud for it, look for it, and search for it. We have to deeply desire it and go after it. Our search for it should be as though we are searching for treasure. That is how valuable wisdom is. It's a treasure. Now, should we consider wisdom a treasure? I just realized I didn't have enough wisdom to turn my phone to vibrate before I started. For God is the source of wisdom. In training for bar mitzvah, Jewish children are first taught an all-encompassing principle from Proverbs 9:10 that says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." So if you're searching for wisdom, shouldn't you go straight to the source? Only God has the answers to life's questions. James wrote, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should go ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you." That comes from James 1-5. So how important is wisdom in our lives? Keeps us alive, helps us to be successful, points us towards eternal life. All those? Anything else? James, what do you think was the wisest thing you did? Mary Ann. She's not in here. All right, we'll make it. Hey, it's recorded, James. We can play it back later that you answered it correctly with Mary Ann. All right. Okay. So is there a difference between wisdom and knowledge? You know, many times people are considered book smart or street smart. A lot of times, street smarts is considered wise on how to handle situations. You know, I look at the difference between my 3 children, and one of them, I think, through Sunday school classes, has been considered renamed Unwise Caleb. And yeah, I've heard it here a few times. And when I think of that, Caleb, growing up, I was never able to buffalo him. Could not fool him on anything. So it's actually, I feel a little ironic that he got that nickname, because he always had a good sense to him. Now, has he always made good choices? Obviously not, if he got the nickname Unwise Caleb in Sunday school class. But as we look for that knowledge and that wisdom, we know we need to turn to God for that. Do you recall the old TV commercial about the one guy that did drugs and nothing bad happened to him? He never hurt himself. He just ended up living in the basement of his parents' basement for all those years, and he didn't, nothing really bad happened. He didn't go to prom. He didn't get a job. He didn't get married. But nothing bad happened to him. He just lived in the basement with his parents. When we don't take risks, when we don't follow God, something, we don't have an opportunity to use those talents that God gave us. So how big is God's role in our search for wisdom? I really question this one right now as I'm sitting up front here. Does God give us everything we need if we ask for it? It's often said that God doesn't, if you ask for something, does God give you patience, or does he give you the opportunity to be patient? Does God give you wisdom or the opportunity to be wise? Take that knowledge, learn from it, they don't see it as a Christian sees wisdom. Being able to make good financial decisions, being able to be successful, could show their wisdom. When we look at, let's go back to the fear of God. Now, it's always been said that the Bible states, do not fear. I've heard it said, 300 and sometimes it's stated in the Bible, do not fear. But yet you just said, Proverbs 7 says, how did you put that? I think verbatim is how she put that, Virginia. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The fear of the Lord in this particular situation has to deal with reverence. It is more or less what I would consider now, we would call it a healthy respect, is how it's been put, Don't want to disappoint God. Have a healthy respect, a reverence. How often do we start our day and try to live our day in that way? With a reverence, not to disappoint, a healthy respect for the Lord. It can even be more challenging in the times that we have right now. As we look at these storms, as we, the crazy part is we got to celebrate that yesterday in Johnstown, the protests went relatively peacefully. That was a win for our area, a big win. We are in troubled times. And we, especially now, have to have that reverence for the Lord. That healthy fear that we not only respect God, but show that respect in our actions and interactions with others. I think we skipped a little ahead here, but I'm going to read Proverbs 1 through 4. Says the Proverbs of Solomon's son. I think we might hit this. It says, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. So that's what we just covered, completely and exactly. Do you think we can gain more knowledge and wisdom from studying Proverbs? I know there's several people in this congregation that really like the book of Proverbs. It says here, Proverbs 1, verses 2 and 3 reveal that students should come to know wisdom and instruction, along with being able to grasp words that conveyed understanding. Moreover, pupils would be the recipients of moral guidance, which equipped them to relate to others in a manner characterized by doing what is right and just and fair. Doing what is right and just and fair. What if we had that all the time, everywhere? What is right, what is just, and what is fair. Completely change the world, wouldn't it? There's one barrier. Sin prevents what is right, what is just, and what is fair from happening all the time. Now, Proverbs, it says, how was that put? It says, is knowledge and discretion to the young. All right, now I was picking a little bit on Buddy Yoder earlier. But he's, in general, you'd have to consider Buddy young at heart, I would think. Right, Buddy? Young at heart? Sure. Clara, was he sleeping? Okay. He doesn't have his hearing aids then. All right, okay. It's embarrassing enough that I have this thing on, not learn to speak up. We do so much for the young people that are in our lives. Biggest part. It's what brought me to this church. To have my children raised so that they know God. They learn what is right, what is fair, and what is just. And I look out here and I see how much each and every one of you has been part of their lives thus far. And that's what I wanted. That's why we came to a church. But where does this stop? Do we reach a level of fullness? Do you think Dave Hayes going far enough that he's good? He's good. He doesn't need any more wisdom. We need to continue to discern. Verse 8 says, "My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. Wisdom crieth without. She uttereth her voice in the streets. She crieth in the chief place of concourse. In the openings of the gates. In the city she uttereth her words, saying, How long, ye simple ones? How will ye love simplicity? I usually don't read the King James Version. Now I know. How often do we listen to our Father's instruction? Yeah, this is speaking earthly father here. Earthly father's instruction. Listen to Buddy more. Not to forsake your mother's teaching. We want the best for our young people. We want them to make good choices. It used to be that you wanted your child to grow up and go to college so he could get a good job. Now is this, fortunately, some of the classes of 2020 got to graduate. Rockwood had a graduation yesterday. They sectioned out on the soccer field. Each family group got a section, but they actually had a graduation. Other schools did it virtually. Other schools are hoping to have their graduation soon. Often at this time they say, what's next? That next step. We've been really looking week to week as what the next step is in this storm, in this situation that we're dealing with, as we try to balance what's best for this congregation. As we look at those young graduates as what's best for them as they start a new chapter, as we're starting a new chapter here, as we try to figure out ways that we can continue to worship the Lord, that we can come here to study His Word so that we can increase our knowledge, our wisdom, so we can do what is just, what is fair, and what is right. It says here, question 7, it says, what view do fools, from Proverbs 1, verse 7, have of the divine wisdom? Any comment? They despise it. They treat it with contempt, with complete contempt.
We're reading a passage there that I think is really
as we look at that, and I'm going to repeat that, what Pastor Ron was referring to, is verse 20. Out in the open, wisdom calls aloud. She raises her voice in the public square. On top of the wall, she cries out. At the city gate, she makes her speech. How long will you, who are simple, love your simple ways? As we have this continuous exposure, let's rely on God for our strength, for our knowledge, for our wisdom, so that all these storms, all these things, that these storms that are meant to try to crush each and every one of us, that we can stand strong because we can rely on the Father. Thank you, everyone.